Good morning, everyone, and welcome to AIPCon 8. My name is Jack Dobson, AIP lead here at Palantir, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the show. For those of you that are returning, welcome back. Those of you that are new to the show, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great morning's content lined up for you, a whole set of customer keynotes, including also our CEO, Dr. Karp, taking to the stage. But before any of that, we have a very special pre-show to kick off the show. I am delighted to be joined with two of my colleagues from Andretti Global. We've got Zach Porter, Senior Simulation Engineer within IndyCar, and then Carl Kirkwood, IndyCar driver with the team. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. So we're going to be kicking off the show with a little bit of a run through and actually a launch of the partnership between Palantir and Andretti. We're going to be showcasing some of the work we've been building over just the last few weeks and setting a vision for what we're going to go and achieve in 2026. So with that, let's hop into a little demo, and we're going to actually drive all of this by showcasing some of the work we've been building together. Perhaps, Zach, do you want to kick us off, introduce us to the world of IndyCar, the world of Andretti, and kind of the beginnings of our partnership?
Yeah, so IndyCar is it's 11 teams, it's 27 full-time entries, 33 at the Indy 500. We compete on road courses, street courses, short ovals, speedways, this massive amount of data, this massive different kinds of racing and all across the globe with massive number of variables and all that we have to work together to make decisions in real time, really quickly between sessions. It's quite a challenge.
That's incredible. And obviously, I mean, as with a lot of the challenges we face out in the field, like this is a heavy data challenge, right? So, Carl, for you, I'm curious, like, as we think about, we're going to be talking a lot about data, a lot about workflows and things like that. As the race weekend progresses, like, how is it for you? Like, what's the progression of a weekend? How do you think about the technology and the data you're working with? And I guess, what's the experience from the driver's side of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to experience. And I don't even know where to start, if I'm being honest. But as a driver, you don't get a lot of time to look over things. You are between media events. You're driving the car. Or meeting with sponsors, partners, whoever it might be, and you get a very short period to actually focus on the data that's in front of you. Mm-hmm. And you're typically always trying to find lap time. You're always looking at sectors. You're looking at speed traces, throttle traces, brake traces, steering traces. And trying to understand where you can find lap time, because ultimately everything leading up into the races is all about just how can you make a car go as fast as possible around a single lap or a single sector. So for us, it's focusing on that, trying to find exactly how we can optimize the corners, the speeds, everything for a driver standpoint, but also for the car. So it's really important. And we, like Zach just said, we have so much data to look at, and it's crucial to pinpoint and find exactly what you need. But there's also so many variables, right? So a lot of times you'll look at a portion of data, and then you also need to compare it to another portion of data, and you kind of just keep falling down rabbit holes trying to understand things. And there's always questions, and we always run out of time. And that's ultimately our sport, right? It's time. It's time on the racetrack. It's time looking at data. It's time in every format. So it's important to get through it quickly to optimize everything.
That's incredible. I mean, as you say, it's as much a race off track as it is on track, right?
Exactly.
And like that is the challenge we're fundamentally solving. So great segue into the problems we're solving together, right? So this is RaceOS. This is what we've been building over just the last few weeks, right? The last handful of races as we closed out the 2025 season. Congrats again.
Thank you.
Fourth in the championship. That's incredible. Zach, do you want to kind of tee up this demo a little bit? Talk us through RaceOS, and we'll also talk through a little bit about how we actually went about building this as well.
Yeah, so RaceOS here is like it's a central point for all the work we do between sessions. So we have, everything from a quick snapshot of timing and scoring in the bottom left corner, maybe some actions in the bottom right there of sensor anomalies or some things that come up that we need to take action on. In the top right, we have weather information, a countdown to the next session, outings along the left-hand side, and then a series of apps along the left that are all the workflows that we need to work through to get from where we are right now and make decisions for the next session.
100%. And as always, like with any race, this is now just a timing game to see how long it takes me to say the word ontology. And that is exactly what we're going to start by talking about. So obviously everything with regards to RaceOS, everything we built is built on Andretti's unique ontology, right? That is the coalescing of the data, the logic, the actions that make up the team, and every single decision you make off and on track. So maybe, like, Zach, talk to me a little bit about the kind of systems that you're working with, how you work with data within the team, and I guess what were some of those challenges that we went in to go and solve?
Yeah, I mean, part of the big problem we have is we have a ton of data, and we're really good with data. We have a ton of tools, and we've been doing this a very long time. As my colleagues say, we're big data before big data was a thing sometimes. And we're really good at that. but it sits in silos and it sits in buckets and it sits in unconnected ways. So timing and scoring comes from IndyCar, but data and telemetry comes from the car, and those two things are not directly connected in any way. And what Foundry's allowed us to do is create those connections to all these like unique individual buckets of data and serve them all up in one way and in relationships that make sense.
Yeah, 100%. So that's obviously where it starts, right? You start with the data component of that sort of holy trinity. So this is our broader ontology. This is the circuitry behind the entirety of Race OS. And as we dive in, we'll see that data component to begin with. So you can see, obviously, we're not thinking about spreadsheets. We're not thinking about data sets. We're thinking about the sort of concepts and the entities you work with on a day-to-day basis, right? You've got the tracks, the drivers, the sessions, lap times, performance. Like this basically allows the team to stop thinking about, oh, where do I need to go to get to that information? And instead, everything is connected, contextualized. So, I mean, Zach, kind of what's your thoughts around how this is going to speed up operations for the team?
For us, we need to serve, kind of like Kyle said too, we need to serve all of these disparate pieces of data up in one way to allow our race engineers and performance engineers and systems engineers to make decisions quicker. So as we connect these things, tracks to sectors, to sessions, to timing, to setups, to all the important pieces of our puzzle, if we can serve them up in one way and present them to our race engineers, we can be more informed to make better decisions sooner.
100%. And I think that's also where AIP comes in, right? The ability to not only just have the data, but also then start adding logic, layering logic on top of that information so we can actually start getting closer to driving decisions, right? Carl, I'm curious for you, like if you put yourself in the position of you've just come straight off track, right? You're in that time between sessions. I've seen you sit down in the engineering truck, you sit with the team and start digging through what just happened, right? What did we learn? How do we improve for the next session? Talk me through some of that process in your mind. Like what kind of things do you want to see? How do you go about sort of evaluating what just happened?
Well, it solely depends on how you do in a session, of course. But I would say in general, you're always looking at teammates' data, and there's many sensors that we can look at as drivers comparative to our teammates. We get raw data from there, but you also look at telemetry, GPS data from other cars that we can also get from the series. And you kind of use both of those along with some video as well. You kind of go back to the raw formats of things, right? Where you're just looking at off-track video, car onboards from the broadcast even. Just a combination of many things that if you're looking for one piece of, you typically start with the data. You start with the data compared to teammates or data compared to another car, and then you find that and you're like, okay, what's going on here? Why do we need to find pace here? And then you translate that into video, on-car or in-car footage, I should say, broadcast footage, whatever it might be, and then you try and just put the whole picture together. So you're always just bouncing around from a lot of different things to find out exactly what you need for pace in the race car.
And our job with that on the engineering side is to take his sensations and his view and the things, his talents in the race car and turn that into data and find actions in the data that back up what he said and helps us understand with context the level of understeer that we need to fix or the level of power down problems or whatever it might be so we can make a data-driven decision to help him go faster.
Makes total sense. And that action component exactly is the next piece of this, right? The ontology is, it's data, it's logic, but it's also the ability to take action on that information as well. So a lot of what we've been building is really kind of empowering your team, right? We're not looking to replace people. Like you guys, as you said, are extremely adept at working with this data. This is about getting the right data into users' hands quicker. And these applications you see on the screen is just a subset of all the apps we've built, right? Like, tell me more, Zach, about like some of the pace that you've seen in actually building this out. We've been working together for a handful of weeks, right?
Yeah, I mean, truly, we spent about, 5 days getting all the different data sources connected and streaming in. And then from there, we've had some use cases with our systems engineers, for example, just fall out and build something that they can take action on in like 24 hours. That's the power of this whole thing is once we get all the data in, once we understand really what the end goals are, some applications just kind of fall out of the bottom and usefulness just comes right away.
That's incredible. So speaking of that, we're sort of in the context now of we are 30 minutes, just over 30 minutes out from the race. We're thinking about car setup, right? Like that's step one of this. How do we start applying everything we've learned, not just this weekend, but also previous weekends at the same track? How do we pull that together to start configuring the car to perform as best as possible on track? So what we see here is actually we're looking at one particular setup that we've run in the past, and you can see we've even got our own Kyle represented in the ontology, but we've also got your performance on track, your laps, your segment times, as you mentioned, and of course, even your commentary there. So every driver comment we get, every engineering change made as a result of those comments it's all captured in that ontology. And this view I actually kind of like, the ability to see, like, if we focus in on Kyle, you can see all of that context that with just one click you can jump to, right? So, I mean, Zach, how would this have worked in the past? Like, if you wanted to jump from Kyle to, like, show me every race, every timing performance, every sector, like, what would that have looked like previously?
Yeah. That's really difficult. In the past, we have like a setup database that has setups that have been run that is broken down across tracks and years and sessions and drivers, and then a different database that has timing and scoring information in it. So you'd have to one by one in all these different programs go to different places and try and drill down to find, there's not even an easy way to search like, hey, what's the fastest we've ever been around this track? You kind of have to just know that and then go to that session and find that setup and find that information and then navigate somewhere else to find all the timing and scoring data and navigate to a different program to find all the time series data that's associated with that. And that's what we're trying to make those connections here.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I think that's also a good segue there of, like, you mentioned you just have to sort of know that kind of intuition you're running on. So the way I've certainly thought about it is, like, how do we bring more of the data backing, more of the actual, like, data-driven insights and actions beyond just the sort of intuition that you guys have built? Because obviously you've got a ton of experience, but this is about backing it up with the right data and also identifying the things that you may have missed, right? Like, what are those things kind of in the gaps, in the noise that you may not have otherwise spotted? So I guess, Carl, for you as well, like, as you think about working with this data and say you're literally 30 minutes out from a race session, like, where's your mind at? And also, what are you thinking about? What do I need to know to perform as best as possible in this next session?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, right? It depends which session you're going into, but I'd say into the race, we're focused a lot on the actual strategy of the race and how is it going to play out? How can we run the fastest, say, 80 laps from the green flag to the checkered? And a lot of that comes down to tire deg, fuel saving, performance. When is the car fast? When is the car slow? How is traffic going to be involved in your race? How are at what point are pit stops going to be the fastest time to optimize your race, right? So there's a lot of variables that you're trying to pull together and you're trying to understand it, but a lot of things change as the race progresses, right? So understanding how the race progresses and how things may change also dictates a lot of how you're ultimately going to end up in a race, right? And trying to understand those things is extremely important.
Yeah, 100%. And Zach, we were talking about this earlier, but I think as we look at this view on the screen now, we've actually, like, the system, AIP, has assisted us with finding 4 potential setups that we can compare, right? I think the cool thing about this is when we start to layer in AIP as well, you start pulling out some of those proactive insights of, here are the things that have happened in the past.
Good
here
morning.
Are the things that you may have forgotten.
The program
yellow
will begin
flag in
soon.
that session, or
Please
that
take
person
your
going off
seats.
track, or whatever it is. What the system can actually do is pull all of that information together alongside the setup data to actually contextualize it with performance information, with session information, beyond just trying to remember why did we run that setup. You now have everything at your fingertips, right? So talk me through how you're thinking about this helping the team in the future.
Yeah, I mean, this particular view here has along the left the fastest lap we've ever run around, and the setup associated with it that we've ever run around Long Beach in this particular case. And in the previous slide, we were searching for something, a setup change that maybe Kyle or Jeremy as race engineer have gone through, and something that they want to explore for this next session. And this AIP has gone through and found inside our database 3 setups that are very similar to that change that they wanted to make, and all the associated data that's with that. So we have the setup differences that are listed here, and then down below there's also the key metrics that are associated with that. And it's quite a powerful tool. Really quickly drill down. We had no way to do this before. No way of making a setup change or proposing a setup change, and then understanding all the things that go along with that we've ever done historically. That's a brand new tool for us.
That's awesome. That's incredible. So I think what we're going to see now is, obviously, that was all the setup information that we quite rightly have hidden from the audience a little bit. We don't want to give away the secret sauce, but you can see all of those parameters, right? The difference here, the deltas from session to session. This is all well and good. Like, it's useful seeing that comparison, but I think it's then how do you actually apply logic on top of that, right? To not just show me the delta, but show me maybe some of the context behind some of that delta, right? Like, why did you make those decisions?
Yeah, each of those setups are run in different years and different sessions in different conditions, and the ability for AIP to go through and provide the context like we see here on the left. So that's a specific setup picked, but then it provides the story of how we got there. So each outing in that session that led up to this, its performance relative to the field, which is the second part we see there, and then its comparison to the reference, the fastest time we've ever gone around that racetrack, and what things are different and what things sort of tell the story of why this is maybe a good direction to go or maybe why it's a bad direction to go.
Exactly. And Carl, talk me through, I know I've heard you in the truck a few times be like, oh, I remember we did this last year, or I remember we ran this setup or something like that. Like, are you often just going off like, oh, what did we do last time? What worked, what didn't? Like, how do you think this would change maybe your flow getting ready for a session?
It's extremely interesting looking at some of this stuff, right? And talking about it beforehand in this pre-show. There's a lot of bins in silos, as you said, that information, topics, setups, everything is kind of spread out, and we're always finding that we have to go to a different folder, a different area, or a different server to find things that we want. And simplifying it and putting it all in one spot saves us so much time. And I go back to the time that our whole motorsports career is about.
Every
time.
minute counts.
You know, every minute counts. Off the track, on the track, everything is important, and it allows us to make more educated decisions with valid information.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to segue. So like this was all pre-race, right? Like we're looking ahead of Long Beach, which was a race this season, which actually Carl won, not to give away the lead there. But I think what's important is, okay, great, we've got our setup down. We can obviously capture that in the ontology. Then we transition to post-race, right? Like, so obviously we get the car ready. We optimize the setup going into the session. That's all well and good. What you can see here is we're actually capturing all of those setup decisions and all the edits that have been made in the ontology. So you're continually adding to those breadcrumbs, right? Like adding to the asset that you have to draw upon next time. I think where this gets particularly exciting is when we start to get into the more telemetry-driven stuff, right? As we start to think about sensors, how the car is performing. So as we now kind of transition to that post-race, you can see there, Carl, you're at the top of the timing stands. That's pretty good. Now the next stage is like, well, what worked? What didn't? How did the car perform? And what can we learn from for next time? And I think we've built some pretty cool stuff around session review. So Zach, talk me through some of the behind the scenes of how we went around building this. And I guess also like, how does this compare to how you guys work with particularly tire information and tire sensor-based data today?
Yeah, when we get to post-session, we have this dump of data that's arrived in all these different forms, and all of them represent a performance or a piece of performance of the car, and how tells the story of how we can go faster someday. Yeah. So this session review piece, specifically this view with tire information here, helps us understand like how we're developing grip over the lap, over a session, and all this stuff is coming in automatically in the background, and it's ready within two or 3 minutes from post-session. That's really the powerful thing is being able to just serve this information up right away instead of our tire engineer, for example, having to go and calculate these reports and put this stuff together, and then it gets sent out 30 or 40 or 50 minutes later, and it gives us a significantly less amount of time to take action upon it.
How do you actually think that's going to compare then? You mentioned it could take 10, 20, like an hour tops to actually coalesce this information. When you've got these, I mean, we've got some great custom widgets here that actually kind of show that information in the format that your users, your team are familiar with. Like, in terms of the time cut down, what do you expect like the impact of this is going to be?
I think what it really does is it allows our engineering group, Kyle's race engineer and Kyle to sit down and in 5 or 6 minutes as they sort of debrief in detail with themselves from the session, to immediately go and like, hey, well, what happened with tire pressure? What happened with the tire temperatures? Why did I have this sensation of oversteer after 3 or 4 laps? Like, what was the temperature distribution front to rear of the tires, for example, or something? And it just serves that information right away. So as they debrief from the session, they can answer their own questions right away.
Yeah. We find that a lot of times we just don't have time to look at things like this, right? There's a lot of important things to look at, and it's kind of in order what you should be looking at. And a lot of times some of this stuff falls behind. So having a clear-cut, informative place to just click on it, review it within seconds, and then get out of it and understand it is absolutely crucial for between sessions, right? A lot of times we don't find things until after a race or after a session at night when engineers are staying up till midnight looking at things. So it's extremely interesting.
And what we saw there in the previous screen was actually some of your comments, right? You've got the evolution of your comments coming out of the car, the changes that the engineers have made as a result, and then you can actually see that outing to outing, right? So, Carl, how do you think about communicating with your team, right? I know that there's a lot of nuance around, like, you could say, oh, this doesn't feel great, this doesn't feel good, but you're always thinking about how can I give my team the right information for them to take the right action? So how do you think about that when communicating with the team on track?
Of course, and you want to give them simple terms that they can understand where you talked about oversteer, understeer, things that are just going to help the balance of the car that you know intuitively that will make it faster. And that's kind of just kind of the seat of the pants of the driver. But you also want it to correlate directly with what the data says. And it's important that you compare each one of those and understand that, because a lot of times you can find yourself where the data completely contradicts what the driver says, and that is a pretty disappointing thing as a driver, if I'm being honest, because usually the data's right. So you're always wanting to match those things up, and when you do match them up, which is 90% of the time, I would say, you usually get good things out of it.
That's awesome. And on that note, talking of data and like backing up your commentary, let's talk sensors for a second. We've done a lot of work to pull in all of the telemetry coming off the car. I think this is amassed to something like 250 billion data points that we're working with within the platform.
Just got started.
Just got started, yeah. This is like days, weeks in. We actually ran this little experiment in Nashville just last weekend when we saw that the time it takes for you to walk from the timing stand on the pit wall back to the garage, in that time, all of that data is flowing off the car into the platform and actually contextualizing within that ontology, ready to start working with. So, Zach, I mean, that's firstly insane. It's just so impressive we'd be able to do that so quickly. How do you think that's going to transform the way that Andretti operates?
I mean, the big challenge, especially with the time series data that we have, is it comes in these big chunks, these big splats between outings, and there's over 2,000 channels of data in there, and much of it is things that we don't necessarily need, or they are channels that are calculating something that we need further downstream that help us inform. You know, Kyle's talking about a high speed imbalance, and we go look at the center of pressure of the car and understand where the aero balance of the car is, and so making sure that data is accurate and is not having failing sensors or missing stuff. You know, these are not gentle road cars that drive around all day. These are race cars that are smashed around the racetrack and occasionally crash, and it's a never-ending battle, unfortunately. It's a never-ending battle to keep every sensor on the car in prime condition and operating correctly, and that's the biggest challenge of this kind of data.
Yeah, that's incredible. And Carl, I mean, I guess for you as well, I think we've talked a lot about how do we make sure that data is in the best possible form, right? Like everything's working, you're getting all the telemetry you need. Like how does that, I guess that makes a massive impact for you, right? When you have that stuff to hand, ready to use as quickly as possible.
Yeah, certainly, right? And there's always questions whether the data that you're looking at is correct or incorrect. And you're always basing it off of multiple other sensors kind of around the car to just correlate and tie the whole picture together. So, you always, and that goes back to what I'm talking about, like in between sessions where you look at one thing and you're like, okay, I see this is what's happening, but what is happening here and what's happening here, and you're always kind of tying the whole picture together. So to have a data point that you know is accurate and you know you can trust is something that also saves time for us, right? And it's very important for performance.
That's awesome. And I think the big thing for us, and I know I've been working with the team a lot on this, is, okay, it's one thing seeing the data, it's one thing having visibility, but it's really about being proactive around, like, what can we alert upon? Like, what can we actually push to the team proactively to say, hey, this is something you should take a look at? So, I mean, tell me the story, Zach. We built this tire pressure and monitoring system workflow, right, where we were building off some of those tire sensors that we're working with to actually identify anomalies and even, like, something around battery levels, right? So tell me a bit the story about how this workflow came to be.
Yeah, we were at Toronto and struggling. Actually, Kyle's car specifically in a session had a TPMS sensor that failed, and that sensor tells us not just the tire pressure, but tire temperatures and all kinds of things that represent performance. And when that fails, that's a huge bit of information that he doesn't have, that we don't have, that we can't make decisions on. So Joe and the group kind of overheard this challenge, and because we were already scooping the data up, because we were already parsing it and doing all the things we were, in about 24 hours, we were able to push this app out to our systems engineers to help them see the status of every sensor that's ever been on the car, when the last time it was run, all the times it was run, what its battery level was, and a little prediction of when that battery might get to a place where they got to take it out of service. And truthfully, since then, since Toronto, Kyle's not had a single TPMS problem on the car because of this app. We've been able to peel the sensors out at the right time and replace them with new ones.
That's awesome. And I think it also speaks to a little bit of our approach of building with Andretti, especially in these last few weeks, where once you get that foundational ontology down, the ability to very quickly stand up new solutions, new apps, like we hear a bit of feedback from the team, we implement it 24 hours later or even less. Like it's kind of enabling the team to move faster, right? Like obviously challenges are always showing up, and the nature of your performance on track, the evolution of the season, the team is constantly evolving, right? So it's a little bit like, how do we keep pace with that and build to exactly what the team needs at any given point, right?
Yeah, and I think like things like this, our systems engineers are really good. They're really bright. They keep the car in a really good running condition, but there are so many sensors and there's so much stuff that humans are bound to miss something. But if we can peel them up and serve them better information sooner, they're happier.
Awesome. That's perfect. So to wrap us up, I think we're going to be talking a little bit about some of that anomaly detection. Like, what are those things that we spot where, okay, obviously the tire battery stuff, pretty simple, like go change this, go solve this problem. I think as you start to talk about identifying those sensor anomalies and those sort of behaviors that are maybe harder to deduce, like what exactly is going on, we're building more of a sort of investigation workflow around that, right? So I guess, like, Zach, tell me a little bit more about how, like, when you see that behavior, like, how did you work with that data previously? How would you go through that process? And as we see in the demo, like, how is that going to change when building with Palantir?
Yeah, so the current workflow would be every time a data file comes off the car, the systems engineer is going to page through very quickly by eye and just make sure that all the critical sensors, all the things that we were testing, everything was working and in working order. And they're humans, so we're going to miss things. Yeah. So if we can add some machine learning on top of that to help flag things that maybe just failed for a split second on a lap that we weren't particularly looking at, we can flag that to go investigate eventually. I think that's really powerful. And then from there, we can drill down into, like, here's all the anomalies we saw. Here's how many of them there were. Here's the corner they keep showing up on. You know, can we flag that for someone else to follow up with later? Is there a build of the car that we have to move around in a different way to prevent these problems from happening? And I think that's the beauty of this deeper dive.
That's awesome. And it's actually a perfect segue as we sort of start to wrap up. Thinking about 2026, right? Carl, as I mentioned, solid performance, this championship, really exciting to see the speed that the team's moving at. How does that set you up for the 26 season, right? Like, what some of the focuses, what's top of mind for you in terms of improvement? Yeah, what does the next few months look like in the off season?
Well, we're in a constantly evolving sport. You always need to progress. You always need to get better, and we have a long time to do that now, and things like this will help us immensely. And for me as a driver, I'm always just trying to figure out, okay, what is our best tracks?
Yep.
How do we improve on that? How do we continue down this route? And then also, what is our worst tracks, and how can we adjust to make those better? So that's really the topic of focus for the offseason for us.
Awesome. And Zach, final remarks from you. What are you most excited about looking forward to the next 12 months with Palantir?
I think the workflows that we can build, that we can take some time away, get our race engineers specifically to go to bed a little earlier and not be staying up so late so they're not so cranky the next morning, and help them make better decisions, because winning races is why we're here.
That's awesome. Well, Carl's going to be upset I got him up bright and early for this little pre-show. But honestly, guys, thank you so much for joining us. This has been great fun. Great to work through all the work that we've built so far in just a few short weeks. I've never been more excited for the next season, honestly.
It's only the start, too.
It's only the start, literally. Well, with that, thank you so much, everyone at home, for tuning in. This is only the start of the show. Do not go anywhere. Thank you so much for joining us. This is AIPCon 8. Thank you for watching.